the 18th of June, Canadian man Hardeep Singh Nijjar was shot and killed by two masked gunmen in Surrey, British Columbia, Canada. Fast forward to the 18th of September, and the Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau would state that the killing was believed to be a targeted assassination by the Indian government. As you might imagine, this isn't the type of shit the leader of a country just says to another nation for shits and giggles, especially when the nation in question is the most populous in the world and armed with nuclear weapons. As expected, diplomatic relations between the two countries were strained by the accusation, with India accusing Canada of harboring terrorists before expelling a senior Canadian diplomat from the country. India would maintain that the accusations were absurd and politically motivated. Hardeep Singh Nijjar himself, a 45-year-old plumber who migrated to Canada from India in the mid-90s, publicly had very little love for the Indian government. An ethnic Sikh, Nijjar was an outspoken supporter of Sikh separatism, a movement which wished to establish an ethno-religious sovereign state called Khalistan. Seemingly devoting his entire life to this cause, Nijjar advocated for Sikh independence in front of the United Nations, traveled to Geneva to ask that anti-Sikh violence in India be acknowledged as genocide, and was one of the few prominent Sikh voices within Canada. With this in mind, India had long accused Nijjar of engaging with the extremist slice of the separatist movement. In 2014, India issued a warrant for his arrest after accusing him of being the leader of the Khalistan Tiger Force, a militant group which is classified as a terrorist organization by the Indian government. Despite their efforts, however, we couldn't link the Khalistan Tiger Force to a single fatality, because in the instance they claimed responsibility for the death of 4 Indian soldiers, police in the area told them they were full of shit. At the risk of downplaying the organization, this dollar store brand Al-Qaeda is really hard to take seriously. Just look at their scuffed as fuck Microsoft Paint looking ass logo. We could do better than this shit. In fact, just look at what our graphic designer Max cooked up on his lunch break. It's not even fucking close. Despite our tangent, we couldn't actually find any evidence that Nijjar was involved in the group, let alone in a leadership position. Over the past decade, Nijjar was accused of being part in a number of extremist activities, including the attempted delivery of ammunition by paraglider and the plotting of the murder of a Hindu priest. He would even be accused by the Indian government of multiple targeted killings within India, which would have him detained for questioning by Canadian authorities. He would be released 24 hours later without charge. Since the middle of 2020, Hardeep Singh Nijjar has been designated as a terrorist by the Indian government, and a reward of just over 16,000 Canadian dollars was offered by the Indian authorities to information that could lead to his arrest. Since Canada announced that Nijjar's death was believed to be a targeted killing, diplomatic relations between the two countries have taken a dip, with negotiations for a trade deal since paused. Both the United States and Australia expressed their deep concern with the allegations, while the Indian government stated, quote, that Canadian political figures have openly expressed sympathy for such elements remains a matter of deep concern. Director of the South Asia Institute at the Wilson Centre, Michael Kugelman, stated that Canada would have had to have gone through very extensive, careful investigations to be willing to make such allegations in the first place. He also pointed out that Canada is a member of the so-called Five Eyes, an intelligence pact that also includes the United States, Britain, Australia, and New Zealand, who would likely have aided the investigation in one way or another. As of time of writing, Canada has not made any of their evidence public regarding the allegation, and will likely have to wait a while longer to see what they've been able to gather. This next story is one Swag really didn't want us to include, but after choosing his stories last, he was left having to write this one himself. We're of course talking about aliens in Mexico. On the 12th of September, Mexican journalist Jaime Maussan unveiled 2 allegedly non-human beings to Mexico's Congress of the Union during a public hearing on UFOs. Maussan claimed that these seemingly mummified corpses were found in a Peruvian diatom mine and believed to be more than 1,000 years old. He would then claim that scientists at the National Autonomous University of Mexico, UNAM, concluded that the corpses are not part of our terrestrial evolution and that almost a third of their DNA is of unknown origin. As you might imagine, UNAM had a fair amount to say about the grand unveiling, with physics researcher Julieta Fierro stating that the university had never made such claims, before going on to politely stress that Maussan's data was a bunch of horseshit. The university would later reiterate that the sample sent to them in 2017 by Maussan was only ever given carbon-14 testing, under which no conclusions could be made. Jaime Maussan has had quite the long history of being caught up in extraterrestrial hoaxes over the years. In 2016, Maussan published what he called a Metapec creature, which turned out to be a skinned monkey. He also claimed to have discovered a demon fairy, which turned out to be an arts and crafts project created from a dead bat, wooden sticks, and epoxy. It would not be revealed to be a fake until after he sold it for $10,000. This would be less fucked up than when he led another event in 2015, where he would unveil what he called an alien child. This would instead turn out to be a mummified human child, estimated to be around 2 years old. Swag took the liberty to actually try and find a single news source that called the Congress corpses legitimate aliens, and it turned out to be quite a difficult task. Even going on the most scuffed websites possible, the only source he could find was from Disclose.tv, a notoriously unreliable website which doesn't list authors or editors, and has a very long history of publishing conspiracy theories and pseudoscience. Trying to find other news sites which claimed that the extraterrestrial was real proved to be extremely challenging, as searching Mexico aliens would usually provide very different search results from what was intended. We should mention that those who felt disappointed by Mexico's most famous arts and crafts project might be interested in some related news, as this month also saw NASA's James Webb Telescope locate an exoplanet about 120 light-years from Earth. The planet, known uncreatively as K2-18b, showed signs of both methane and carbon dioxide, but more interestingly, a chemical known as dimethyl sulfide, which on Earth is only produced by life. It should be noted that dimethyl sulfide might be able to be formed by geological processes we've yet to discover. With this in mind, even chemical signs from a planet over a quadrillion miles away is still a better indication of alien life than whatever the fuck Jaime Maussan showed off in Mexico. As climate change makes weather events more likely and more intense, we figured we'd save some time if we rolled all natural disasters into one story. Starting on the 5th of this month, Tropical Storm Daniel developed around the country of Greece, causing record amounts of rainfall throughout the country. Areas around central Greece experienced rainwater volumes within the range of 400 to 600 millimeters, or as much as 750 millimeters in the small village of Zagora. The flooding throughout Greece destroyed 720 square kilometers of agricultural land, while killing thousands of livestock and causing widespread destruction to civilian infrastructure. A few days later, on September 8th, Hong Kong would also experience record amounts of rainfall from the remains of Typhoon Haikui. The low-pressure storm brought destructive flooding throughout the region, which caused substantial damage to property with dozens of injuries and a few fatalities reported. Hong Kong experienced rainfall totals up to 800 millimeters in just 24 hours and broke its highest recorded one-hour rainfall record, which has stood since 2008. On the same day, the country of Morocco would experience its most devastating earthquake in years, with a 6.8 magnitude earthquake striking within the High Atlas mountain region over the country, near the city of Marrakesh. The earthquake, at time of writing, has killed over 3,000 people within the region and caused an extensive array of destruction and destabilization. Most building architecture and construction materials present within Marrakesh were made of non-earthquake resistant material, making the city extremely susceptible to collapse. The combination of fault lines accumulating energy in the southern border of the High Atlas Belt and a severe lack of emergency preparation resources led to the ensuing humanitarian crisis. Morocco's earthquake devastation would be surpassed just 3 days later by catastrophic flooding within Libya on September 11th. Tropical Storm Daniel, the same storm responsible for the flooding in Greece, made its way to the northern parts of Libya, where it would go on to cause similar rainstorm flooding. However, the true crisis in Libya would come after 2 dams collapsed along the Wadi Derna River, flooding the city of Derna completely. At the time of writing, the World Health Organization reports that there were at least 3,958 registered deaths, with an unofficial death toll estimated at 11,300, with as many as 9,000 people still reportedly missing. While Libyan officials warned residents to evacuate from coastal areas days before the storm made landfall, there were no warnings given for the flood and subsequent dam collapse. Rescue efforts, humanitarian aid, and investigations into the dam's collapse are all still underway. Discussions surrounding climate change have come up alongside this month's unfortunate disasters. While the Moroccan earthquake's occurrence is hypothesized to be relatively unrelated to global climate change, evidence points to climate change being a main driver for the increase in the rate of extreme weather events being seen within recent times. According to the World Weather Attribution Initiative, planet-warming pollution was responsible for making rainfall amounts experienced within Libya 50 times more likely to occur. The climate group also found the extreme level of rainfall being experienced in the countries of Greece, Turkey, and Bulgaria are 10 times more likely to happen as a result of climate warming pollution. While global warming did not directly cause the flooding experienced in these several regions, it was responsible for the environmental factors capable of producing extreme weather patterns at a more frequent rate. As depressing as it is, more extreme weather patterns will likely continue to occur worldwide, and will only become worse the warmer the Earth becomes. We now move on to a touching story of how two pen pals would finally get the chance to meet in person: Vladimir Putin of Russia and Kim Jong-un of North Korea. After traveling aboard his personal armored train, Kim Jong-un was greeted by Putin, who gave the North Korean leader a personal tour of the spaceport before exchanging gifts. It should be noted how rare it is for the North Korean leader to leave the borders of his territory, with this trip being the longest amount of time he's spent outside of his country. It is also the first time he has left North Korea since meeting Donald Trump in 2019. After the initial meeting, the two girl bosses then toured around the Russian Far East for a few more days, inspecting the satellite fighter jet factories before pledging to support each other in the fight against imperialism and to have more sleepovers. With the pleasantries out of the way, the two men got down to business. Several long meetings took place over the 7-day visit to Russia and continued even after Un began his journey back home. After a failed North Korean satellite launch, it is speculated that Un wants to make use of Russian military technology. In particular, spy satellites, rocket technology, and upgrades to North Korea's aging fighter jets are thought to be the main aims of the visit. This is due to the fact that North Korea is heavily sanctioned, and it is unlikely any other major technological power would be willing to risk violating sanctions to help them. Russia, however, is already the most sanctioned country in the world, meaning they've become somewhat immune from sanctions anyway. It'd be like threatening to cut off a person's legs when they didn't have any in the first place. Of course, nothing is free, and viewers can bet that Putin isn't just doing this out of the goodness of his heart. Putin's year-and-a-half war long in Ukraine has taken significant toll on Russian military reserves, particularly ammunition, something Kim Jong-un just so happens to be sitting on a big pile of. Russia and North Korea have historically had a relatively friendly relationship, particularly when their respective relationships with Western nations are low. Despite warm relations at the moment, Russia is strongly protective of their secrets, particularly those relating to their aerospace and nuclear technology. On the other hand, North Korea does not want to expend all their stockpiles of ammunition by aiding a war on the other side of the world. And while North Korea has an established history of making these munitions, calling the shells advanced would be quite the stretch. Regardless of how many North Korea are able to send, Russia would still be limited to low-precision barrage-type attacks, while Ukraine's 20-year-old HIMARS systems, donated by Uncle Sam, is accurate to 1 meter from 300 kilometers away. This said, having a bunch of Soviet-era shells manufactured by slave labor is a hell of a lot cheaper than buying them from Lockheed Martin. As we often mention, however, a lot of what is donated by the United States comes from its aging stockpile, meaning giving these munitions to Ukraine is just a convenient way to dispose of them. With this in mind, viewers who might live within a heavily sanctioned country may be interested in today's sponsor. If we know anything about our audience, it's that the only thing you like more than sharks is pulling off a gnarly floater before tube riding the curl into the sunset. Lucky for us, Surfshark is combining our two favorite things. So not only do you feel safe at the beach, but also when you're surfing online. So like, we all know Surfshark VPN is your wingman for keeping your deets on the down low, right? But here's the rad part. It's also got this gnarly, clean web feature that's like a shield against ads, trackers, malware, and anything fishy. That's fishy with a PH, by the way, for all you pun lovers out there. We all know that VPNs can make it easier for you globetrotters and wave knockers to appear anywhere in the world at the push of a button. But not only does it make it wicked easy to protect your privacy, but you get access to region-locked content not even available on your shores. We're not gonna let the man tell you what you can and can't watch. And to make a good time even sweeter, just drop in the code on screen, and you're scoring a gnarly 3 months on the house. And here's the scoop. If you're not totally stoked with it, no sweat. You can bail in the first 30 days for no reason at all, and they'll give you a full refund. No questions asked. Surfshark VPN. We're taking it literally now. Meanwhile, the US military loses a $100 million fighter jet. American cities are suing Kia and Hyundai for making their cars too easy to steal. And the most powerful man in Australia abdicates his throne at 92. Next up, we have a double feature of the Biden family. First up is famous Pangea explorer Joe Biden, who faces an impeachment inquiry in the House of US Representatives. To be entirely clear, Joe Biden has not been impeached, but rather the House has opened an impeachment inquiry into the president, which is the step taken before an impeachment trial officially begins. How such an impeachment works is that the House will first investigate whether Biden has committed an impeachable offense. Should they find that there's evidence to support an impeachment, the issue will be brought to the full House, who will then deliberate and vote among themselves. If impeachment passes a simple majority vote, then it moves on to the Senate, who will hold a trial, with the senators themselves acting as jurors. After careful deliberating, the senators will then proceed to strictly vote on party lines, making it impossible for a two-thirds majority to ever impeach a single president. This month is far from the first time that US Revolutionary War hero Joe Biden has had articles of impeachment introduced against him. In fact, on his very first day in office, Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene filed an article of impeachment over Biden's alleged corruption with a business in Ukraine. From his roughly 3 years as president, Biden has had 15 such articles filed against him, which works out to be around once every 2 months. Despite this, the articles have typically had minimal support from the wider House, even among Republicans, so they largely get left on the road. This inquiry, however, did not originate out of an article, with the Speaker of the House, Kevin McCarthy, launching the inquiry for the purpose of finding any evidence, or lack thereof, before entertaining future impeachment articles. In this instance, it is alleged that Mr. Biden profited from his son Hunter's business dealings while serving as vice president between 2009 and 2017. With the annual government budget showdown upcoming, and the fact that the inquiry did not arise out of an article of impeachment, some speculate that the inquiry is an attempt by McCarthy to appease more hardline Republicans, in order to both avoid a government shutdown and to secure his job as Speaker of the House. It should be noted that McCarthy himself said that the House does not have any evidence of Biden committing an impeachable crime, because the point of the inquiry is to find if there actually is any. At the moment, the inquiry has only just gotten started, so it remains to see if anything will come of it. With all of this in mind, the frankly more interesting story is Hunter Biden, who as far back as 2020 has become famous for being the center of a wide range of conspiracy theories, as well as the monolithic amount of drugs he's been able to ingest. In 2019, someone who claimed to be Hunter Biden dropped off a laptop at a computer repair shop in Delaware and requested that its data be recovered. Later, the shop owner then allegedly discovered evidence surrounding Hunter Biden's business dealings in Ukraine and China. That implicated Joe Biden in some shady shit while he was vice president under Obama. Beyond these emails, there was also allegedly images showing Hunter Biden in bed with prostitutes, doing drugs, and one which apparently revealed Hunter's penis length, which we're too professional to publicly reveal. Verifying anything which came out of the laptop is extremely difficult, and many experts are still sorting through what is legitimate and what may have been tampered with. So take anything that comes out of that source with an 8-inch grain of salt. Hunter himself has been in the public eye since at least the 1970s, and has had a long history of drug and alcohol abuse since his law school days in the 1990s. Quite famously, Hunter signed up for the Navy Reserves in 2013, but was expelled on his first day on base after testing positive for cocaine. In 2018, Hunter, on a whim, decided to buy a handgun and allegedly lied on the form saying that he was not an active drug abuser. The weapon would later be thrown out after he made suicidal remarks. Hunter previously agreed to plead guilty to 2 misdemeanor tax charges in exchange for avoiding a more serious weapons charge. However, shortly before the deal was completed, it unraveled, as the US Justice Department was facing increased pressure from Republicans who alleged that the department was giving Hunter a sweetheart deal. Subsequently, the gun purchased in 2018 became a major point, and the Justice Department announced that they were filing for a felony gun charge stemming from his alleged dishonesty on the application form. The irony isn't lost on the news team that Republicans and Democrats seem to have suddenly flipped positions on how strict gun regulations should be. As is the case with Joe's impeachment proceedings, this is also in the early stages, and public details are few and far between. Rest assured, if either of them ends up on the inside of a prison cell, we'll be sure to make Tim the Writer do something about it. In what's seemingly become a monthly segment, we now move on to yet another military coup in Africa. Late into the month of August and into early September, a group of Gabonese military officers, on orders from General Brice Oligui Nguema, seized power in an attempted coup, by placing President Ali Bongo Ondimba under arrest at his palace. The best part is that the president and the leader of the coup just happen to be cousins. Soon thereafter, General Nguma declared himself president and used his military faction to establish the Committee for the Transition and Restoration of Institutions. But because that's a stupid name, we'll just be calling them the CTRI. The CTRI went on to reject the most recent presidential election results, close Gabon's border, and shut down all government institutions within the country, including the Senate, the National Assembly, and presumably the anti-coup task force. For those unaware, the past few general elections within Gabon have been surrounded by controversy, with the general elections held back in 2016 ending in violence after claims of irregular voting regulations from opposition supporters. The most recent election, however, had two candidates, one being Ali Bongo Ondimba, representing Gabon's Democratic Party and the Bongo family regime, and Albert Ondo Ossa, representing the opposing Alternates 2023 party, aimed at bringing widespread change to the country. The 2023 election ended with Ali Bongo winning a third term and taking 64.27% of the vote, with Albert Ondo Ossa taking 30.77%. Ondo Ossa and representatives on his team claimed election fraud in the form of suspicious election delays, rapid changes to the electoral rules a month before the election was held, and internet shutdowns in the days surrounding the election. For a fun swag news tip, if your government cuts off, restricts, or filters your internet usage days before an election, they're almost certainly trying to rig that shit. For context, we should probably point out that up until this month, the Bongo family had ruled Gabon for the past 54 years, a tenure which was characterized by more corruption and nepotism than you could shake an AK-47 at. In the 2016 election, for example, one province saw the Bongo family receive 95.5% of the vote, with a 99.9% turnout. This number looked so made up, it would literally go on to spark protests countrywide. Following the election on August 26th of this year, the CTRI claimed that the general elections were neither transparent, credible, or inclusive enough for the people of Gabon, and that the ruling authorities have been on a steady decline of irresponsible and unpredictable governance, resulting in a continuing deterioration in social cohesion which risks leading the country into chaos. In order to combat this alleged chaos, the military has deemed it necessary to completely strip Gabon of its civilian rule and democracy in order to lead the country into what it believes is a more prosperous future. In the weeks following the military takeover, the CTRI would go on to release ousted President Ali Bongo Ondimba from his house arrest to allow for international travel relating to health appointments, with Ondimba opting to stay at his private residency. The CTRI would also announce the appointment of Transitional Prime Minister Raymond Ndong Sima, a former Prime Minister serving from 2012 to 2014 and vocal critic against President Ali Bongo. Unfortunately, Gabon is another country in Africa to have experienced the recent trend of military coup takeovers that have been on the rise since 2020. Successful African coups in the last 3 years include Mali, Chad, Guinea, Sudan, Burkina Faso, and Niger. While all of these countries had different circumstances that led to coups taking place, each military operation was seemingly influenced by one another, which aided in the destabilization of democracy across Africa. While nations around the world condemn the military's actions in Gabon, Gabonese citizens are grappling with the new power dynamic. Those who support the new leadership and their actions against the long-ruling family have taken to the streets in solidarity, while others around the nation protest the military's destabilization of the government. Recently appointed Prime Minister Sima suggested that the country won't likely return to civilian rule until a year or more time has passed, making the future of Gabon's stability unclear. This latest coup in Gabon marks the 106th successful coup attempt in Africa since 1952. Like death and taxes, our coverage of the war in Ukraine is a certainty. According to Ukrainian officials, 3 elite Russian brigades have been left without combat capabilities after major Ukrainian victories around the city of Bakhmut. Although progress is slow, Ukraine has been able to gradually regain ground in these vital few warmer months, before the armies entrench themselves for the winter. In terms of foreign support, the United States has begun sending depleted uranium anti-tank shells to Ukraine, which really isn't an ideal situation for anyone, least of all the people unlucky enough to be a part of a Russian tank crew. As our script was being finalized, the protagonist of Far Cry Primal and current US President Joe Biden authorized sending an additional $235 million in a military aid package. Pinning down the exact value of these aid packages can often be difficult, as much of the time, the value of these weapons can be inflated to their initial purchase price, and not their depreciated value after spending a decade in storage. The United States continues to be the biggest winner in the war in Ukraine, getting to supercharge its weapons industry, cripple one of its biggest rivals without risking a single American life, and doing so with just 5.6% of its defense budget. This isn't even considering the weapons data and power projection that comes from these aid packages, the value of which can be difficult to quantify. On the other side of the world, President Xi Jinping of China announced that there would be a meeting with Russia scheduled for October. It is important to note that China has not yet given any military aid to Russia, as doing so would risk the nation triggering a whole minefield of Yu-Gi-Oh! Sanctions trap cards. In addition, several new drone attacks have been confirmed by both Ukraine and Russia, with the Russian side being far more effective. So far, most drones that have made their way over Russian soil have been shot down before they can do much damage to military installations, much less civilian infrastructure. Alternatively, Russian suicide drones have proven effective on the Ukrainian front, and on the 19th of this month, there was even a drone attack on the Ukrainian city of Lviv, which lies almost on the border with Poland. According to a UN humanitarian coordinator for Ukraine, these hunter-killer drones managed to burn down a warehouse that sheltered a vast amount of the region's relief supplies. The very same humanitarian worker went on to say that attacks impacting humanitarian supplies have escalated from the start of the year. Russia has also made their fair share of war crime allegations, as according to Russian state media, the Ukrainian military was responsible for a drone strike targeting a market in the eastern Donetsk region, which claimed the lives of 16 people and injured more than 30 others. This claim has been disputed, however, as the Ukrainian military has denied any involvement in the attack on their own civilians. Further investigation revealed that the fragments from the missile recovered at the impact site were from an S-300 surface-to-air missile system, which was originally invented by the Soviet Union. Moving on from Call of Duty kill streaks terrorizing civilians, we now turn to Elon Musk and his orbital VSATs. According to a biography written by American journalist Walter Isaacson, Musk had refused to allow Ukraine to use Starlink internet services to launch a surprise attack on Russian forces in Crimea last September. This allegedly led to a failed drone operation that was intended to strike Russian naval assets. Mr. Musk later stated that he did not wish to be explicitly complicit in a major act of war and conflict escalation. It should be noted that Musk was not on a military contract when he declined to extend Starlink coverage for the attack, as the company had been providing the service for free in the first few months of the war. Following the failed naval incident last September, the US military has funded and officially contracted Starlink for official support. The failure of the operation has made military planners reconsider the importance of having explicit contracts in place before working with commercial partners. We now move on to the elephant in the room, the death of the Wagner leader Yevgeny Prigozhin, who died on a plane crash on the 23rd of August this year. US intelligence believes the crash was organized by the Kremlin, an allegation the Russian government has firmly denied. Shortly after Prigozhin's death was confirmed by Russian officials, it was announced that the defense ministry would be attempting to assume control of the Wagner mercenary company. Viewers may recall that the main reason Yevgeny Prigozhin was allegedly assassinated was because of his one-day rebellion back in June of this year, which was in response to the Russian government wanting to fold Wagner into the rest of the Russian army. As the old saying goes, if you come at the king, you better not miss. The Wagner Group has extensive holdings not only in Eastern Europe, but in Central and Northern Africa as well. While this is entirely speculation, the dissolving of Wagner may also be an attempt to seize the massive reserves of mineral wealth they possess. Wagner's purpose has always been speculated to be the Black Ops arm of the Russian government. Since the start of the war with Greater Ukraine, however, the element of subtlety seems to have fallen by the wayside, while more tangible assets have become far more valuable. Quite often, Wagner Group in Africa plays an active role in arming and assisting paramilitary groups to destabilize already fragile governments. In return, the mercenary group is often repaid in materials such as gold and oil, and occasionally given the rights to mines and oil fields. Presumably, the gold and other rare earth minerals harvested from African nations will play an even more substantial role in bankrolling the Russian invasion. As the weather in Eastern Europe starts to turn, it is likely that Africa will become a new front in this ongoing war. Unfortunately, this more than likely means that an end to the war in Ukraine is even further out of reach, and we shouldn't expect any kind of conclusion for at least another year. With the news over, it's officially announcement time, and if you haven't checked it out already, our second channel, Sir Swag Academy, is already building up an impressive backlog. We all know that attention spans are getting shorter by the day, which is why a lot of this second channel is just cherry-picking some of our best moments you probably haven't seen. If you can't be fucked watching through the 700 hours of content on this channel, just head over to Swag Academy, and we'll do the hard work for you. Speaking of hard work, you may have noticed that this new series is an absolute bitch to put together, taking 10 people around 2 whole weeks to make. This is why we'd like to thank our very generous Patreon supporters, who let us cover these stories as objectively as we can. Despite our viewership rising, our support account has unfortunately been declining since the start of last year. So viewers who want to help us out, get access to exclusive content, or just have their name in the end credits, can find a link to that in the description. With all of this said, on behalf of the entire news team, we'd like to wish everyone a happy October of 2023.